Hi everyone, we are here for the second Instagram Live for Water is Love. With Shrishtee Bajpai from India, who is an ecological researcher, activist, Indigenous rights advocate, somebody who's worked for the rights of rivers, and is also a core member of the Global Tapestry of Alternatives that is connecting radical projects for just a second, we're getting Shristee on here. So Global Tapestry of Alternatives is a network that connects myriad projects around the world, creating radical alternatives to capitalist modernity. And Shristee is unable to join. So just give us a moment. We're getting her on here. Here we go. Hi, Shristee. Nice to have you.
Hi, Martin. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. I just introduced you to our followers. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
And maybe we just start, if you could share a little bit about your connection with water, your relationship with water, what your work has been, but maybe even just start on a personal note, like why have you come to work with water?
Well, water is so essential for life that it's it's obvious. I mean, one would be drawn to work there. I guess having lived along the river Ganges, I was born in the northern part of India, and I was very connected to the river Ganga, and seeing my family, life all around me, holding the river so sacred as goddess, as mother, but at the same time also river being excessively polluted and dammed and diverted, and I really couldn't make sense of that contradiction as a young child as to why we would hold a river so sacred and call her mother and take a dip in it and believe that it will absolve all our sins and yet pollute it so much. That contradiction, that sense of, living with that stark reality of human existence across the world right now, the way we live, that we depend on this earth, we must be, all our life is just centered around this earth, yet we treat it the way we treat it. So I guess with that sense of contradiction, I was always feeling not able to resolve it and not able to find answers to it. And which is why I think I got into the world of ecological activism and, researching and thinking more about that. But in particular, working around water and rivers just happened. It just happened. But I think I was always dealing with that question as a young child, and living along the river and a river like Ganga, such a powerful and magnificent river. I was just drawn to that, and I'm covering so much more, talking to and working with communities who live along these landscapes and rivers and ecosystems.
Thanks for sharing. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the idea of river rights, like what that is, why that is, and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, river rights, in terms of how we call it right now, river rights is a new concept, about I think a few decades old concept. But in terms of its real essence or meaning, that nature has rights, nature has agency. Rivers are not just merely water flowing from one source to the other or the megawatts of energy it can produce, but actually a living entity. with the spirit and agency of its own. So that kind of worldview has always been among indigenous cultures, communities who have lived along these ecosystems. But somehow in the modern life and the way we have come to live in this discourse, we've forgotten this aliveness of nature. So this concept emerges in that context of how can we recognize, because nature and rivers and ecosystems already have the right to exist. So how can, as humans, we recognize that they, just like you and I have the right to live, so do they have the right to live and exist. The river has the right to flow, and if the river doesn't flow, then it is not a river. And it emerges from that very essence of recognizing that the rest of nature has rights, um, and really going into thinking about how can the worldviews of communities who have lived with this sense of interdependence and relationality and reciprocity with rest of nature, how can those worldviews become part of our decision making, become part of our institutions, become part of our legal systems? Because if we look at the legal systems across the world, the Western legal system look at nature as property, as a resource that can be extracted. And so this is trying to change or shift that logic of looking at rest of nature not from that point of view, but actually a point of view where we see them as alive. And then what does it mean to build a dam or divert a river or obstruct, or so many things that we are
Mm.
doing to our rivers and ecosystems.
Maybe could you give us some examples or experiences in trying to conduct this shift?
Yeah, I guess one that I want to tell, which has been really moving for me from the Trans-Himalayan landscape here in India, and this is the bioregion which connects Tibet, part of India, and then goes to Himachal. So it's a fantastic Trans-Himalayan landscape.
Mhm.
No other landscape or region looks as beautiful as that. And the river Indus flows through this landscape. So Indus crosses through India, China, Pakistan. The basin is as really big. And here we've been doing some walks along the river and talking to people and communities of, this is the region where earliest civilization came about, the Indus Valley civilization. So what it is to live along this magnificent river that, doesn't really follow any nation state boundaries and challenge the human conception of borders. But also, what does it mean to live along this river? What is the relationship? And I was talking to young people, and something that water, the film also, Water is Love, was kind of, building on the young people and the relationship that they share with nature. And a young girl, often we feel that, young people would not be able to imagine, but actually, young people are so imaginative, and the ones who are not bogged down by the modern education system can think about things in such a different way. And I was asking about river rights and, what does it mean? And she said that the river has a right to sing. And I was really surprised as to why would a young girl think that the river has a right to sing. And then I was surprised at my own surprise, but this is what I think truly the essence of the whole my engagement with the rights of rivers movement is, that how can we reimagine, or how can we bring the sense of what it is to have this embodied knowledge of living along the river, and that is something that is getting lost. But in the discourse of rights of nature, what has been happening across the world, and I think some examples are really powerful. But the first one that happened was from Ecuador, where the rights of nature were guaranteed in the constitution itself, and then lots of efforts being made. But what is for me really essential is that how can we bring these worldviews? The river has a right to sing, that the river has a right to play, and these broader conceptions of having nature as alive. And of course, the river has a right to flow and perform its ecological functions, but also begin to question the systems that we are living in. That it is not just about changing the legal systems, but it is also about changing the way we govern the human and the rest of nature as well, or how we have constructed our economies. We can't talk about rights of nature or rights of rivers with the same extractive economies that govern, much of the economic governance in the world today. Or we cannot talk about rights of nature while also talking about indigenous rights. So a lot of communities across the world who are talking about rights of nature, especially the indigenous communities, are saying that there is no separation between humans and nature. Has been the Western concept. And so how can rights of nature movement actually, it's not animal rights movement that spoke about the separation from humans and nature, but rather it's a movement that is saying that we are part and we are interconnected. There is no, we can't think about our existence or nature's existence in separation. It has to be so intertwined, and it is intertwined. So it is the recognition of that interbeingness that all of us share, and then building on changes and transformations through that. And then it calls for more intersectional ways of being and changing. And we had actually a very interesting case in India with all of its problems, but the river Ganges that I was mentioning earlier and Yamuna were recognized as living entities, and also their originating glaciers. But this kind of discourse is still very hard to seep in because, as you would imagine, our legal systems are not moving towards actually protecting ecosystems, because they're still governed by the logic of development or extraction. And so there's a lot of struggle, but it is beginning to see some sort of transformations.
Yeah, very powerful. Thank you for sharing. I also really appreciate how you are speaking to the holistic nature of this change. Like, we need to change our worldview and our relationship with the living world, but we also need to change our economical systems and our educational systems, and how it's all kind of part of this bigger approach to systemic change. And maybe you could share with us a little bit more about your work on radical alternatives, creating these new systems. Yeah, what is your work on systemic change, raising those new systems?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just build on this and then maybe expand a little bit on why the need is there of thinking about our work from a very intersectional and cross-sectoral way. So when we started, I mean, when I myself were getting engaged with a lot of communities and people working here in India, my first instance of actually transformation was when I was speaking to this indigenous elder in central India, and I asked him that, why are you protecting this mountain and this ecosystem from mining? You can get job and, move to a nearby city, which the mining company is offering you. So why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And this elder told me that, yeah, we can go somewhere maybe, but what happens to the spirits in the forest? What happens to the birds and the animals in the forest? What happens to the lake around it? And where will that go and what will happen to that? And so for me, what was really transformative as an activist who went there was that people did not look at nature separately. So they were not trying to protect their livelihoods. There was much bigger meaning of a sense of community that we in modern lives have, forgotten about. That community is not just about humans; it's about more than humans as well. And so, how do we speak up and speak for and really hold that sense of community together? And and in that very process of experience of what a community is, I felt that the struggle which seemed political, ecological from a worldview that I was looking at was a deeply personal, and as the film talks about, it was a struggle of love, love for the world and love for these ecosystems. um, and so that was, I think, the most transformative experience in terms of looking and then working towards not just protecting your ecosystems or your rivers or your waterscapes or mountainscapes, but really asking more profound and deeper questions as to, do we have the right to decide what happens to our ecosystem? So, who is deciding for us? Is it a corporation? Is it a state? Is it a bureaucracy? But that right should be with us. And so, really asking fundamental question of self-determination and autonomy, and bringing in the essence, okay, but why are they making those questions? Okay, maybe we are making certain choices about life which is based on consumption and exploitation of nature. So we are talking about a different sort of livelihoods as well. And then within your community is examining that whose voice is heard more. Is it men or women? So that also changes the dynamic and discourse of your political action. And so really also thinking about social justice and inequalities. And so I realize that when people are struggling at the grassroots, when they're really talking about protection of their environment and ecosystems, it's not just about that. It's about life overall, because it's also interconnected. And so if we really want to transform things, we have to transform them more systematically, because that's when truly the transformations happen. And that we see of all the radical transformative work that is happening across the world, that when we're talking about protections of ecosystems, it is about also defense for life, defense for territory, and struggles for autonomy. And people are really resisting the oppression, but also, trying to build the alternatives, and trying to build the possibilities. At that very same moment. And so for me, that work and that understanding is very important, and especially in the times that we are living in, where crisis and just the insurmountable and bewildering levels of destruction that is happening in the world, what people are doing at the grassroots of really changing the systems of oppression, along with challenging, but also building things differently, is profoundly important. And I feel some sort of responsibility for all of us to visibilize those. Also, the film does that very beautifully. I really like that element of the film, that it was not only about the doom and things gone wrong, but truly about what people are doing to change that. And I think that's where my work also within Global Tapestry of Alternatives and networks here in India, Vikalp Sangam, lies at visibilizing these voices, bringing together, learning from each other, and really looking at issues more systematically.
Great. And maybe tell us a little bit about how people can learn more about your work and Global Tapestry of Alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, GTA is of. I don't know if I can put here the link to the website. Technologically, I don't know, but
You
yeah,
can put it
Global
into the
Tapestry of
comments.
Okay, perfect. But Global Tapestry of Alternatives can be found on the website. The Indian network that I'm part of, Alternative Confluence, really brings, because in India, Confluence is a very secret site where two or three rivers meet, and that's why we call it Vikalp Sangam. And many streams of alternatives and possibilities and diversity of worldviews coming together. All of this is available online, and you can look at our work and follow more. And some of the interesting work on documenting the worldviews of communities and peoples across the world on how do we build alternatives, and experiences of that also can be found on these respective websites.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time with us today, sharing about your work and reminding us about the primacy of relationship as a kind of ethical and even political guideline. And I do invite people to learn more about the Global Tapestry of Alternatives, the work on river rights. And yeah, everybody who hasn't seen the film that we've been referring to, this is Water is Love, Ripples of Regeneration, documentary that talks about project of ecological regeneration and looks at how restoring and regenerating water cycles is fundamental to restoring climatic stability and resilience as we go forward. So thank you so much, Shristee, and yeah, hope to see you next time for the Water is Love Live Talks. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you so much.